We talk a lot about region, and we've been talking about this region for the most part, but I think actually, Bill, you may have touched on this about just the idea of we're a statewide ecosystem. I guess, but we also know that I grew up in Central Washington, the other side of the mountains. Maybe they're not benefiting as much of the growth and the economic prosperity we're having here, or the impacts of it. How do we make this a statewide thing? Because it seems it is so important to connect it, and they are connected. Bill, you want to touch on that?
Yeah, I think it's definitely challenging to reach into these communities and help them. Part of it, they need to just bring some pride back to these communities. They're broken down. When you don't have jobs, people leave. That's a difficult thing to overcome. And so, trying to find appropriate businesses that work in these communities, I think, is a really important thing. And so that's, I think, economic development in these smaller rural areas is a really critical thing that the state can do.
Anybody else want to touch on that? We can move on here.
I was just going to say, I think the port, and Courtney referenced the regional sort of planning process, and there is an opportunity to think about, we've got passenger traffic, we've got cargo traffic, we've got a lot of different elements, even just down at the port, and then there's the maritime piece. Are there elements of that trade and travel that we should actually move to just east of the mountains or move to other communities, both to bring opportunity there, but also to alleviate some of the pressure here at sort of the crux of the greater Seattle area? So I think there's questions there that I know the port is asking and I think could contribute to that question.
So it's 2018, we're here in January, we kind of moving into a new year. There's a lot of, we have a new mayor in Seattle, we have the Democrats have kind of gotten the majority again in Olympia. We also have a new port executive director. Talk a bit about, I guess, the region and particularly the impact in the communities that you see in the coming year. What are you hopeful for as far as how growth is affecting us, but also how we're going to manage it in this coming year? What do you see there, and what do you hope for? Nicole?
Light rail, light rail, light rail. Tacoma today hasn't even met Tacoma in 20 years. Yeah. And the way that this region is going to transform, the way it's going to urbanize, I think that if we engage and participate and do it right, that it's going to be incredible. And I think that transportation is absolutely central.
I live 6 miles away from KCTS, and sometimes it can take me an hour and a half to get home. Right. And I sit there in the car thinking, light rail, light rail, light rail. Yeah, so I can relate. Daryl.
Well, I have a wish list, but I won't go through it all. I think, here's my message as we look to our new leaders. Think about what it means to bring all of the stakeholders to the table. Without getting into specific details, I'll say there have been moments in the last couple of years where I think that hasn't happened, and that decisions have been made, important policy decisions have been made in a bit of a vacuum. And if there were that opportunity created to bring all stakeholders to the table to talk about constructive ideas and constructive solutions to the problems that we all know that we're facing, I think those policy decisions would be better than perhaps they have been. So I think the port actually provides a model example for how to do this, because I think the port has led the way in that regard. Certainly in Seattle Goodwill's work with the port, I think it does represent a wonderful model. So I'd like to see Mayor Durkin and other community leaders really commit to that in this next year and beyond, and I think that'll make a difference.
Diana?
Yeah, I think this ongoing conversation about growth, and the one wrinkle that I would add, we've talked a little bit about ground capacity, we've talked a little bit about connecting with communities, we haven't talked a lot about the air. And if we are having a regional conversation about trade and travel, and it includes SeaTac Airport, I do think we're going to have to connect that to sustainability, but also to just airspace. And that's often something that we don't think about. I'm learning more about it, and there's very small holes in the sky, so to speak. So that's another angle that I think just keeping the complexity of the conversation together and all of the voices at the table will be a really positive thing in 2018.
Jill?
I'll just reinforce the notion of mobility and the importance of focusing on every single thing that helps us to get where we need to go, 2 minutes faster. Our employees travel on average 3 hours a day. Most of them do not live within close proximity to Vigor, and if you think about the quality of life that allows them after a long, hard day of work, 3 hours a day reduces family opportunities to be together and a lot of other opportunities for people to give back to the communities in which they live. So focusing on mobility from our perspective is just essential. And something that we think about is whether we should be looking at more marine opportunities as it relates to mobility. Should there be fast ferries from Tacoma to Seattle, or from North to Seattle, or from Bellevue to Seattle? So to get a little bit more creative, we do live in a marine environment, and other municipalities such as San Francisco are looking at how do we move people from here to there, and how do we use the asset of the water in that regard. So that's something that we think about. I guess in terms of an example of working together as a region, I think there's some promise in the One Table effort that is being undertaken by the King County Executive and our new Seattle Mayor to address the issue of homelessness. And we like to look for people and leaders, and the Port is such a leader, where we figure out what we can do together, what can we do to address these problems instead of focusing on these things that divide people, but what can we agree on? I think we can all agree that children should not be homeless, that families should not be homeless, that people ought to have opportunities for jobs. So I do think that this One Table effort is a promising one, and it's wonderful to see people work across their organizations and do it together.
Bill?
Yeah, I think coming from Shellfish, I want to make sure that we're thoughtful about growth. Let's learn from the lessons that we've learned in the past. Water quality, we've worked really hard. We've actually made a lot of improvements here in Puget Sound, but it's still a struggle. And so making sure we make good land use decisions, I think that's a really important aspect of growth and how we can work with it here for at least the shellfish industry.
Taylor, final word.
I'll make it good. For me, I think there is an undercurrent of excitement with the new leadership that we're seeing at the Port with Mayor Durkin. So I'm very optimistic that 2018 will bring a lot of change. It may be slow, but we're getting there. I think we made some progress in 2017, and 2018 is a great opportunity for us to push that, all those changes that we want to do through. In terms of small businesses, I think I'm excited for 2018 because I think in the past few years, there's been a lot of regulatory fatigue for small business. They have been vilified in the press that business is bad for Seattle, and that is the cause of a lot of woes that's happening in our economy. And so I think there's an undercurrent and optimism. Let's put our heads together. Let's bring folks to the table. Let's make it work. Let's make some changes. And I think today at the Port, and thank you for having us here to share our thoughts. And that's, I think, a great start to 2018. And I look forward to working with the Port to make those changes.
Round for applause for our panel.